Cool.
Cool. Yeah.
Sorry about that, guys.
Thanks, okay, so let me start this off by saying I am not a lawyer, and this is not legal advice, and we don't know how the space is essentially going to evolve, specifically around bonding code. So what I started saying earlier was there's two paths this can go down. One is the patent path. So let's say I'm an existing patent holder, or I'm a pharma startup that has a patent. And we are choosing to now put this patent on a market like this. A patent is an asset, so then we're definitely talking securities law. That's not a problem though, because that's actually good. Like, this is a good thing because it gives assurance to everyone who contributes to that bonding curve. And it's also, as I said earlier, a legal protection for the researcher to actually have the legal right to engage in researching this particular patented compound. And what we're doing there is more specifically is, so we're based in Switzerland, as Tyler mentioned, with the Swiss Foundation. And one of the goals of the foundation is to very actively explore the legal space around that and create open source legal framework that anyone can easily use to spin up a market. So essentially bring down the cost of creating a market like this to ideally a couple $100, maybe even lower. So kind of open sourcing those legal frameworks. The other route that we kind of talked about earlier is, let's say if we don't have a patent and we publish our research for the first time, now that's also kind of a right in a good way, because now no one else can patent it once it's out there. So once the market is created on molecule, that means that can never be patented again. Now molecules is essentially the only place where this would then live, and where then what that token then represents is governance, potentially governance rights on how to commercialize that drug. Not necessarily commercialization rights, but how to commercialize it, or even if to commercialize it. And in that case, we're not in the area of securities. And in that case, we're actually in a kind of new gray legal area where we're now talking about governance of open source compounds, delivery systems, pharmaceuticals.
Okay,
so
I like that answer. Yeah, no, that sounds fun.
Yeah, I mean, these are big questions in a lot of ways. Yeah, and I think particularly the question of what are you actually buying when you buy shares in a market that isn't necessarily owned by anyone. Like Paul said, it could be governance, but perhaps there's other ways of thinking about this that we simply haven't thought of yet. I'm sure there's other creative ways that we could approach these problems, but yeah, I guess it'll be interesting to see how that develops.
Could you speak a little bit about sort of this hybrid structure of it being like a Swiss legal entity as well as a smart contract, and just what you've been finding out while trying to make these hybrid entities and how you want to implement it, so at least how it looks so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So they don't have to necessarily be Swiss entities. The Swiss entity that we have is a foundation that is essentially developing the core software protocol as an open source software. So that's different from the actual markets that would be on that protocol. For that, you could essentially be anywhere. And then it depends, if you have a patent, you could move that patent into a trust. And then the trust would be that legal entity that then has a relationship with the smart contract. And the token holders essentially now have a claim on the trust. If it's a fully open source software without a fully open source drug without a patent, then you could then move into territory like DAOs, like decentralized autonomous organizations. However, that adds even more complexity. But you could question whether you would then need a legal entity. Personally, I think you still would to some extent. Once you really start getting into like advanced stages of testing. But maybe to cut it short, one of the legal structures that we have explored further are trusts. which is also a fun legal structure because it's very flexible, and it's not commonly used.
Ronnie, did you have a question? Did you want to hop in with a question?
Yeah, thanks. I didn't want to cut everybody off. So guys, I'm Ronnie B. I'm one of the IDO Bitcoin Group guys, and one of the things we do is a lot of blockchain, smart contract, everything. So from the blockchain perspective, everything. There's 1,000 different ways we could skin this cat. A lot of different opportunities. I want to ask some questions so I kind of get a better understanding of kind of the intellectual property sides. So one of the things that I'm unfamiliar with is the patent process. I haven't gotten a patent for probably maybe in 20 years. 20 years ago was the last time I dealt with intellectual properties. Is the process for, let's say you've got a guy like David Ishii working out of his garage, and he wants to patent something. Is this going to be an easier process for him to use the molecule vehicle to get patented than for him to go out on his own and do it?
So we're not necessarily, we haven't really explored the idea of actually using molecule for the patent process itself. It's more likely something where someone who holds a patent will be able to upload that patent and create a market around it, or similar, like Paul was saying, you could create a market for something that is not patented and therefore will never be patentable, because once you actually publish, if I make a discovery and I publish or make that discovery known, it is no longer patentable. That said, there's no reason to think that you couldn't create, let's say, like try to get funding to actually patent something and maybe have non-disclosure agreements or something like that on chain. But yeah, we haven't really looked into that specifically. And interestingly, this protocol could be used for distribution of ownership in any type of patent. But the reason, one of the pharmaceutical patents, chemical patents, are quite black and white in the sense that, at least when you're not talking about a drug delivery system, if you're talking about a specific compound, it comes down to something called the Marcuse structure. And if you have the structure of that compound, and it's a novel structure that hasn't been patented, you could patent that, for example, and it's fairly straightforward.
But you're saying if you were to put that structure in the Creative Commons, then it's nobody can patent it now at that point. Is that correct?
If you publish on that structure before patenting it, no one can then patent that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I get that. So I guess part of my other question, you answered it. I was kind of curious, why not go a more Creative Commons route, since it's going to be an open source protocol anyway? And I think we've kind of got that covered. So here's another thing that I'm thinking about. So there's two sides of this, right? There's people that invest in the tokens, people that would create the market, create the liquidity, but then there's also going to be equity I assume there could be equity investors. Maybe someone wants a greater share of the overall company molecule. So in that case, what we're talking about is this is kind of an IP funnel, an IP bucket, but it's got a lot of holes in it. The IP leaks out. I don't know that that's a bad thing. I almost look at it like Hewlett-Packard produces these really cheap printers and they sell this really expensive ink, and you're stuck buying the ink for the rest of your life. Although, so I'm curious, I almost think we have this in reverse. I think the ink is the intellectual property, and we're building a mechanism that lets it leak out. Is there anything else that's enticing it? Because I don't understand that side of the equation that well. Is there anything else that's enticing that, yes, the intellectual property is available for anyone to share, to build on and grow, just like we do in software now. But is there something that the people that would be an investor on either side, really, that would look at and say, oh, this is a good thing. This intellectual property is actually, the fertilizer that's watering the garden, so to speak. I mean, I guess I want to understand that a little bit better. What am I missing? What's the piece that I'm missing that to give the intellectual property away will grow the value, not only if you're a staker in the token, but also if you're a equity shareholder in the company?
Maybe to jump in quick. So if it is actually a patented compound, and let's say the patent goes to market eventually, like it actually gets approved and commercialized, then now as a stakeholder in the patent, I would be entitled to royalties from the commercialization. So that is a clear reason for me to invest. Like,
so how is this related to Molecule specifically? So Molecule is the bucket, is the platform on which these other things will be utilizing the Molecule incentivization structure, right? The bonded curves that are built using Molecule. But tell me a little bit about how Molecule, that organization, is related to this. So I understand the bonding curves specifically for each molecule or for each, patentable idea. But how is tell me about Molecule's placement in relation to all of this, I guess, like the business structure of Molecule or yes.
So like what does Molecule stand to, how are we going to make money kind of question?
Sort of, just like where is its placement in this whole thing? So right, if somebody just opened up this idea of, if we made an open source
I can jump in. Yeah, I can jump in very, very easy. So imagine a Petri dish. Imagine a Petri dish. And on the Petri dish, you have different types of growth. You could have hundreds of thousands, millions of potential ideas, compounds, patents, 80 to 90 to 95%, most likely to fail, most likely never to be widely used in the human body. We are the glass that allows things to grow on. How those individual markets function, who engages in them, that is fundamentally up to the individual market participant. So if you think of it in that way, then we're kind of like like essentially providing the basic infrastructure for people to interact.
Yeah, the platform.
Or something analogous to the Ethereum network in some ways.
Yeah, exactly, and that's how I look at it. But so to go further with that analogy, what is its purpose? So if you open source the bonded curves or the nested bonded curves that he was talking about, if you just open source that, why wouldn't people just be utilizing the Ethereum platform with this type of bonded curves alone? Like, is this? I know that this is a platform, but tell me, are you going to tokenize the platform in order to try to bootstrap what you guys are building, or you guys are just going to build it out? And again, I can imagine somebody just taking this open source bonded curve structure that you develop, and then what is the need of why would you build it on top of Molecule instead of just utilizing the Ethereum blockchain?
So one problem is, I can tell you a very simple reason. If you have people investing into patents and individual patent holders, you are, in some extent, in the securities realm. And so Molecule by design is a non-anonymous platform. It's the participants, the patent, the market creator is known. So with the individual participants in the market. You could think of pseudo-anonymous markets, but as soon as you're in intellectual property area, you need to know who is investing into these individual things, who created them, is the creator the actual owner of the IP? And that's where the realm of using a fully open source network like Ethereum becomes more difficult. In addition to that, what we would be providing is the interfaces to these platforms, the legal frameworks to actually be able to create a market like this and give the investors security.
Because you guys are helping with the burden of the investment trust, right? Because you guys is that a part of it? Like you would be smoothing out the investment trust part of it.
That would be a part of it. So in some way, it's also applying a little bit more of an end-to-end thinking to how these things develop. Of course, I think you could very easily take a bonding curve design and create your own market on the public network. Just to answer that, there wouldn't be anyone stopping you, but I think you'd run into all kinds of problems around the legal viability of this, plugging into other tools,
identity,
kind of that whole layer. And that's not necessarily something that a pharma startup or a biohacker wants to deal with.
Or a researcher, yeah.
Or a researcher would be interested in kind of taking an open source bonding curve code base and going live with that.
Cool. So, and again, you said these ideas can be pretty much used across all types of IP, correct? So in theory, this could be moved, for other but you're saying this is a high pain point for pharmaceuticals specifically in molecules, but this same sort of platform could be utilized for all IP, essentially.
Correct.
We have been toying with that idea, but we always discard it very quickly because other areas of IP tend to get very messy very quickly. And kind of as Tyler said, chemical IP tends to be highly deterministic. So that's one reason. And the other reason is, well, I'm extremely passionate about innovation in the pharmaceutical space and innovation in the healthcare space more broadly, and just the pure potential that we have with biochemical engineering, and kind of to open that up.
Go ahead. You have a question, Ronnie?
Yeah. Okay. So just to follow up, so patents are kind of could end up being kind of a necessary process of this mechanism. If we facilitated patents to scientists and researchers, and then the smart contracts have ownership, is it always the case that if a patent gets deployed into the wild, Merck or Pfizer, somebody starts using this patent, it always is due a royalty, or is that a negotiation? Is that another contract?
So this is where the patent investment trust could come into play. Again, I would assume that 80% of these markets are not going to be very active. And that's the beauty of curation markets. It's actually discovering where the broader public sees value. Because some researcher that you've never heard of at a distant university far, far away might know something about the specific compound that you've patented or have been working on. And thus through Molecule be incentivized to share that information. And the same would be in a B2B fashion. Sorry, can you just say your question again?
Well, yeah, so essentially it seemed that a scientist or a researcher that was able to have a patent, if we facilitated that process for them. In other words, it's a cookie cutter, it's a bootstrap. They walk in, here's my chemical, boom, we have a patent, it's in the smart contract. If we facilitated that, even if we have an overabundance, let's say 99% of all patents are bogus, that still might be where the real attraction is to the stakeholders. So if I'm a stakeholder, and I may have misunderstood your idea slightly, but if I can put stake into this smart contract that's for progeria, and then I can buy this other smart contract that actually doesn't have a patent, it's only Creative Commons and it's just for a particular chemical structure, I might be more inclined to go to the one, because of hopium and FOMO, I might go to the one that has the patent associated with it. So if we facilitated that patent process, took the burden off of the researchers, that might be a really valuable tool. And so my question was, but the problem is, so I have a patent, that still doesn't get me money if Merck decides to produce the product, via my patent. I mean, I'd have to sue them, or we'd have to arrange a contract where they're paying me royalties. Was essentially my question.
No, I mean that's how patents work. If you hold a patent, and if Roche wanted to, let's say Roche wanted to produce this drug, then they would have to engage into a commercial negotiation with you and pay you royalties.
Yeah,
right. So that
you would have the ability to license that.
Okay, so I was just trying to see where the higher value is from a stakeholder. When I say stakeholder, I mean a token, a person who's going to own the token, where the real value was. All right, and so how, then of course we see Dr. Church is working on, he's buying your genome.
Yeah, Nebula Genomics.
Yeah, he'll fully sequence your entire genome. He'll get a corporation to pay for it if you surrender all of your, if you have a particular disease or some sort of affliction or predilection, he'll buy that DNA for his use. But that's a walled garden. That's a centralized mechanism. Is there an opportunity to do that here? Upload your genome, and maybe we give you some sort of diet based off of your genetics, but then we're aggregating all of humanity's genome for use selling elsewhere. We sell to a company that's going to use it to cure cancer or to eliminate diabetes, etc. Is that a possibility also with this system? Or is that too far out right now?
That's my question too.
I think there's we've gotten ourselves into many conversations and many dialogues about all of the potential future possibilities with this system. And ideally, we would build an architecture that could be adapted and could be utilized for many different processes, for example, like the one you're just talking about. But initially, I think the thinking is just to stick with, I mean, Paul might have some further insight into this, but I think just dealing with distribution of patent ownership or creating markets for potential therapeutic pathways, patent or non-patent, is already not necessarily a Herculean task, but something that's going to take a fair amount of time anyway to develop. But we would like to see, any areas in which we could innovate are obviously areas that we're interested in innovating in. But I don't think the focus is going to be on those things up front. From our perspective, what this also allows us to do beyond some of the things we've been talking about, pharmaceutical companies themselves also sit on large amounts of IP that typically go undeveloped. A pharmaceutical company might have 100 different patents on potential drugs that they are never going to develop. One thing that this allows a pharmaceutical company to do is to create markets for those, so that potentially other pharmaceutical companies could buy those patents. It could allow them to get liquidity in the short term from those patents. Similarly, people could trade up and down these bonding curves, retail investors, similar to biotech traders. So there could be short-term opportunities for them. We want to create mechanisms so you could short these markets as well. If you're a researcher or a scientist and you see that there's some kind of bogus thing that is generating interest on here, and you know that therapeutic might not work, we want to create opportunities where you could short those curves as well. So there's a lot of different mechanisms and a lot of different monetary incentives that we hope to build into these systems as well, so that there's reasons for people to use them, whether they're a consumer, a retail investor, a biotech trader, a pharmaceutical company, et cetera. Kind of like we were talking about before, trying to align all of these stakeholders. So there are more aspects to this than simply just open sourcing drug development and allowing people to create markets. We want to create kind of an interactive system that every type of stakeholder in the drug development ecosystem could utilize, and we kind of see this as the next generation of drug development in that sense. But like you're saying, there's so many possibilities with these distributed systems. Who knows what the future holds. Paul, do you have anything to add to that?
Maybe just to add an insight from a few years at like different tech startups. You can dig your own grave by creating a market for yourself that is too big, very, very quickly. And so this is just a realization of like, there's a lot of things, as Tyler said, there's a lot of things that could be potentially done. We do want to focus on a specific user group and solve specific pain points going into this. Yes, we're building this as an open source tool, but it needs to solve problems that people have today. And that's one thing that I've been interested in specifically in macroeconomics and pharma, and how much damage pharma has done as well to the broader public. And those are huge societal and corporate pain points that we can actually fix. So kind of focusing on those pain points initially, and then also supporting kind of this future of collaboration that we're seeing more and more, that came in many ways from the open source movement in software, but I think that could just as well be applied to things like pharmaceutical development.
Do you guys plan on using? Do you plan on using the Ethereum blockchain? You were planning on using Tell me a little bit about that.
So I've been in the Ethereum ecosystem for the past 3 years, so since late 2015. Huge fan. I've been to three DEF CONs now. So one big hurdle to overcome is obviously the identity issue. It could be that the chain that we're developing is semi-public. It definitely needs to be interoperable with other protocols, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So anything that we can use from other systems that are being developed, we want to use.
Can you give me an example of why you believe that it needs to be interoperable? What other systems, and what benefits are they providing?
So one example would be Ocean. So Ocean is a data marketplace where we've been working together with the team of Ocean. They're based in Berlin. What Ocean is building is a data marketplace specifically for AI and machine learning algorithms to train on these data sets. But what it means is, as a researcher now, if I upload a data set onto Ocean, Ocean uses a similar curation markets concept where people bet on certain data sets. So they acquire stake in data sets, and the more that data set is used, the more
The better it gets.
Yeah, exactly. And so what we have now is, and so data, so patient data, but all kinds of data, so this could be molecular data, is increasingly being used to generate new compounds. So what we have now is you could have an AI startup that is focusing on pharmaceuticals, that is using data sets on Ocean to create new compounds on Molecule, and then you create data sets of those molecules, put them onto Ocean again, and you kind of get these recursive loops in technology and of different technological systems interface. So that would just be one example of data. And data in pharmaceutical development is obviously huge. It's you want to gather data about compounds, and you might only want restrictive access to that data. We are not a data. So we need
Perfect.
to.
Is Ocean its own chain, or is it built on top of Ethereum?
I think so. To my knowledge, I don't know if they've publicly announced this, but they are. They've been experimenting with Substrate, which is Parity's Parity's blockchain builder, which will most likely then work on Polkadot. I could see Molecule being a parachain on Polkadot. It could also be on Ethereum. We're like at this point in building, we're fairly agnostic on what we're launching on. What we do know is we don't need our own consensus system. That makes sense. We're not building our own blockchain.
Perfect.
But it is a protocol in a sense, and yeah.
Yep, I understand. Perfect. Great. That's great. I understand now.
Hey guys, I've hit my time constraint. I wanted to ask you just one more thing. So, and I'm not sure where you guys are at with this, but do you have an interest in outside venture capital? And do you guys have pitch decks or pro formas or anything put together already? Do you have anything online that I can look at?
So we don't have anything online at the moment. We have a landing page.
You're catching us about 2 weeks in advance. Yeah.
Okay. We haven't really gone public with a public launch yet, just because there were so many aspects of this we had to research first. Building a credible list of advisors and so on and so forth. But yeah, we'd be happy to send you something in the upcoming weeks. Once we get closer to the launch.
Okay, I have to go, guys. Tristan's got all my contact stuff. So Tristan, I will communicate with you and look to see, what kind of documents or anything else you get, and what kind of help you guys want from us. And obviously we need to have another dialogue. This is really powerful, very interesting stuff. I mean, the legs on this she's going to run fast once it gets up and going.
Thanks so much for that, and we would really like to engage further with you. So I'll be in touch with you through Tristan, and I hope to make these chats slightly more regular as well. There's lots of things to discuss.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Cool. Thanks. Take care.
See you guys.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got to get going here soon too. But does anyone else have any other questions that are pressing?
So about the genetic data, for example, which Mr. Church is trying to capitalize upon, I want to see that from where I can get access to the genetic data, especially for running some experiments on that. So how do I get that? I can run an AI on the genetic data and try to get to the bottom of what is causing the disease.
Are you asking how you specifically can get access to to the data that Nebula Genomics is collating?
Well, I have talked to George, and basically it's about money, and I can't afford that many millions, and that is problem with many biohackers right now.
Sure.
they are able to get the patent. Like the patent, you are thinking that it is knowledge. There is so much knowledge inside the pharma companies, which is not even leaked out. So that knowledge is like one can find at SkyHub, or one can find at different places. We have our own forums, of course, and but the thing is, once I get I don't even know how many biohackers actually use patents, because nobody is going to go and check in the lab what am I doing.
Sure.
It only comes to I only come to use a patent if I'm commercializing something.
So yeah, and I think that speaks to how we can. There, like I said, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't necessarily have to be a patent that you're uploading. You could upload an idea that is not patentable, or something that you're comfortable with not ever being patented. The only thing you're losing in that sense would be, I guess, some type of exclusivity when it comes to the commercialization of that. But yeah, I'm not sure. Could you? I'm sorry. Maybe could you restate your question?
Yes. For example, most of the knowledge which Alphabet is generating, or the Google's parent is generating in the biotech space, that is passed down through informal channels, and we have access to that, like what they are doing actually. But we don't have access to the data, whether it be genetic data or molecular data, and that essentially brings us to the question: how usable is that knowledge? Because we don't have the data with us.
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. One thing that I'm hoping could happen with this, for example, is that if there was something, so if I created a market, for example, all of the research relevant to that market could be uploaded as well. And if you buy a share in that market, even for like, you would have access to all of that research and all of that data. I mean, you're speaking to a much broader problem, which is data exclusivity and protection of like genomic data, for example. I think there's a lot of people trying to solve these problems. Healthcare data is also relatively sensitive data. It's difficult to get. It has to be anonymized and treated in some respects. I don't necessarily know a short-term solution to those problems. I hope as people begin to work on these things in a more open nature, and as more collaborative, more open work begins to be done, anyone who wants access to that data for computational purposes or to do analysis on it will have access to that. But I think this is a broader systemic problem that we're going to be fighting over the next decade or so. I hope we can make some. I hope we can make some headway with that with Molecule. But like I said, we haven't necessarily. We're not a company that has begun to think about, selling data, for example, or I hope we can just distribute the data that is attached to these patents in a fair, in a fair way to anyone who's interested.
And so what is the idea of the structure behind Molecule? And so, like, again, I don't know if you guys were planning on doing some VC stuff, or were you looking to tokenize the protocol layer? I mean, what is, you're going to have, it's going to be centralized protocol? I mean, tell me a little bit about what that looks like, or what you're anticipating, or what I mean, if you can.
Paul, do you want to take that with regards to the tokenization of the ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. So the underlying protocol is tokenized. We're still playing around with a variety of
token models
structure on the protocol layer. Things like access rights, which means how essentially you need to protect a protocol like this from spam.
Yeah.
So there's a basic staking function, for example, that needs to be fulfilled when someone, like a security deposit, when someone puts something on the protocol. There's governance functions that will come into play for the protocol itself at a larger stake. Like once this thing actually, if and when, and hopefully when it takes off. And we are taking in funding to develop the protocol in the long run. All that funding will go to a Swiss nonprofit.
And so do you guys have a team that exists right now that is doing research into this? How big is your team? Do you have timelines for any of these things that we're discussing?
So we have a team of I think it's about 14 people in total now. 8 people on this working full time. And the protocol itself is being developed by Linum Labs AG, which is a Swiss software development company, partially based in Switzerland. We're now in Basel, actually, in Berlin, and in Cape Town.
Are you guys seeking more employees? Is there something that you guys have a need for currently?
Yeah, absolutely. We're hiring.
Do you have a link to that, and what type of positions you're looking for? It's almost always you're looking for software people in this space. Are you looking for anything in particular?
We're always hiring developers. Beyond that, we're increasing our community building team, our growth team, product managers. Yeah, it's a long list. But yeah, I'd be happy to send you an email, and yeah, we'd love to have a conversation.
Yeah, guys, I just want to say briefly, there's 3 minutes left on this call. If possible, Tristan, I'm not sure if you have my email address or if I have yours. I guess I do have yours. Perhaps I could send our contact info and some, like maybe a presentation on the company, and we can continue these conversations. For example, if people are interested in jobs or want to learn more about the actual company structure and stuff like that, I'm happy to schedule another call with anyone who's interested.
Yeah. One thing I forgot to mention, researchers, obviously. We're hiring researchers also on a full-time basis in a lot of different, into a lot of different areas. Either kind of as advisors or, yeah. So, but yeah, we're definitely growing the team. So if you have something interesting that you're working on or would love to talk further, yeah, let's take it.
Yeah, I would love to be in touch and see hear a little bit more about what specifically you're looking for. And I mean, I'm pretty well connected in the space, so I know a lot of people. I'm interested in the project. Ronnie is the person that invited me. He's part of the Idaho Bitcoin group. I know he's connected to a lot of people. So I mean, we're just looking to help everybody out.
Cool, wonderful,
awesome.
What I can also do, if you guys are keen, we can have a follow-up call again in like 2 weeks, like 4 weeks. Like with the broader people that were onto this call, we can actually grow this into like more of a community call.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. Yeah, if Paul and Tyler, if you send me your emails, I will send them to everybody else who I reached out to for this call.
Well, I'm just going to drop mine in the chat window, and I'll actually drop Paul's in as well. It's just
all right. Thanks for meeting everybody. Tyler and Paul, I wish you the best on your release in 2020. Looking forward to staying connected and seeing how development goes.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much, and we'll be in touch. Let's collaborate. Cool. Cheers, guys.
Awesome. See you next time.
Cheers.
Bye, everybody.
And thanks again, Tristan.